a long time ago, so long that some people might have forgotten. Almost everybody on Earth looked up at the sky. In the early hours of July 20th, 1969, the world held its breath as a grainy black and white television broadcast showed a small craft descending toward a distant rocky mass, not knowing that this tiny vessel would soon become a symbol of humankind's ingenuity and collective spirit. And when Neil Armstrong stepped out of the lunar module onto the dusty surface of the moon, an estimated 530 million people across 33 countries, waving flags and hugging strangers. In that one moment, differences seemed to fade away. It didn't matter that you were American or Russian, Protestant or Catholic, capitalist or communist. For a few precious minutes, everyone belonged to the same species, the human species, and they were witnessing an extraordinary feat, the first human landing on the moon. But what if that moment never happened? What if the Eagle had never landed? Now, let us pull back the curtain and take a look at some of the items that helped make that monumental moment possible. These boots may not seem like much now, but they're actually extremely important. You see, they're the very boots worn by Buzz Aldrin during the Apollo 11 mission. Look at these boots. They have walked on the moon, but they also walked us into the future. If the mission had failed, who knows how far behind we'd be? Would we still have GPS in our pockets? The internet in every home? Maybe the digital age would have arrived decades later. Maybe not at all. What would become of the technologies we know today? We can only suppose, can we? If you like our channel, subscribe to it. Well, let's talk about something else that played a vital role in the Apollo 11 mission. Precision instruments and complex technology. The navigation system used on the Apollo 11 mission was truly a marvel of its time. Without it, the astronauts would never have been able to navigate the vast distances of space and land accurately on the moon. Can you imagine the chaos that would have ensued if the spaceship had missed their landing site by even a few miles? Thankfully, it never came to that. The mission was a resounding success, thanks in part to this cutting-edge technology. And it turns out that today we have access to similar technology that allows us to invest in assets anywhere in the world with incredible ease. What if that guy never actually walked on the moon? And what if the entire space race was just a myth? If humanity had failed to land on the moon, the world economy might have looked very different. Billions in research and development, satellites, semiconductors, aerospace industries might never have taken off. No lunar landing might have meant no satellite infrastructure. No satellite infrastructure, no global communication, no smartphones, no market as we know it. Think about it. No GPS, no other satellites to warn us of hurricanes, no global live broadcasts. Without the moon landing, the motivation to miniaturize computers for spaceflight would have vanished. And with it, the personal computer revolution. What if the internet had been delayed by 30 years, or never happened at all? Now imagine Wall Street without real-time trading, international business without a video conference, entire industries from aviation to logistics. Stuck in the analog age, progress doesn't wait. And without that moment in 1969, progress might never have launched. More than just an epic feat of engineering, Apollo 11 was the ignition switch for the modern world. It told governments that science was worth funding. It told youth that engineering was heroic. It told the world that the future was something you could build, not just dream. Without it, we might still be grounded, both literally and economically. Returning to our story, let's say the lunar module's sophisticated navigation system never existed. What would have happened next is anybody's guess. Perhaps the astronauts would have been forced to abort the mission and return home empty-handed. Or maybe they would have managed to land safely, albeit in an unknown location, far from the carefully selected site of Tranquility Base. Maybe the world would have cheered anyway, but the consequences of such a navigational error would have been significant. It would have demonstrated that even with the best planning and preparation, the risks associated with space travel are immense. Such a setback could have shaken public confidence in NASA's ability to execute such a complex mission successfully. It would also have highlighted the fragility of the technology that was so crucial to the Apollo 11 mission's success. In fact, during the Apollo 11 mission, the crew experienced a series of technical issues that threatened to derail their mission. One such issue occurred during the descent to the moon's surface when the computer system aboard the lunar module began to overheat. This problem was caused by a software glitch that had gone unnoticed during testing on Earth. If left unchecked, this issue could have caused catastrophic damage to the spacecraft's delicate electronics, potentially ending the mission before it even began. Fortunately, Armstrong and Aldrin, the two astronauts aboard the lunar module, were able to work together to manually override the computer's autopilot mode, allowing them to land the spacecraft safely. If they hadn't been able to do so, the mission would have been aborted, and they would have been forced to return home without ever having set foot on the moon. This incident was one of several that tested the limits of both the spacecraft and the astronauts' skill and ingenuity. But in the end, it was these very challenges that made the Apollo 11 mission such an extraordinary achievement. It was a testament to human curiosity and determination, So imagine what would have happened if these technological hiccups had been enough to derail the mission. On July 20th, 1969, millions of people around the world waited anxiously for news of the Apollo 11 mission. When word came that Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin had landed on the moon, celebrations erupted, but not everyone was celebrating. High up in a remote location shrouded in secrecy, a group of men huddled around a radio, listening intently to the transmissions from Houston. They were members of the Soviet space program and they were devastated. Their own plans to reach the moon had fallen behind schedule, and the thought that the Americans had beaten them to the punch was unbearable. In the weeks and months that followed, the Soviets denied it at first. Then, quietly, they shifted gears. They had already sent the first man into space, Yuri Gagarin, a symbol of communist triumph. But imagine if they had landed on the moon first. The red flag, not the stars and stripes, planted in lunar dust. The Cold War might have tipped. Propaganda would have crowned Moscow the heart of human progress. And Washington, just another capital watching history being written from the wrong side. The stakes were simply too high for them to fail. The Cold War was raging, and losing the space race to the Americans was unthinkable. For a moment, it seemed as though the Soviets might yet catch up. But as the years passed, it became clear that it wasn't going to happen. The Americans had established a firm foothold on the moon, and the Soviets were left with nothing but empty space. Without the lunar landing, the US space program wouldn't have received the funding it needed to continue exploring the moon. The shuttle program would have never gotten off the ground. International Space Station would have remained just a dream. It's hard to overstate the impact that the lunar landings had on the future of space exploration. They inspired generations of scientists, engineers, and dreamers, and showed the world that anything was possible with enough determination and hard work. But what if they hadn't succeeded? In an alternate timeline where the lunar landing fails, the implications are staggering. Without this monumental achievement, the space race would have taken a completely different path. The Soviets, who were neck and neck with the Americans in the space race, would have seized the opportunity to claim lunar supremacy and the bragging rights that came with it. The political ramifications of such a victory would have been significant, possibly shifting the balance of power in the Cold War. As the Americans grappled with the disappointment of failing to reach the moon first, the Soviets would have reveled in their success. The propaganda machine would have churned out countless articles and films, celebrating the triumph of communism over capitalism, and the world would have marveled at the feats of the Soviet cosmonauts who had reached the moon, while their American counterparts were still stuck on Earth. The impact of the moon landings on popular culture is undeniable. The images of astronauts floating through space and planting a flag on the lunar surface became iconic symbols of the era. Films like 2001, A Space Odyssey in television, shows like Star Trek and The Twilight Zone helped to capture the public's imagination and made space exploration and science fiction a part of mainstream culture. But without the moon landings, who knows what kind of cultural touchstones would have emerged? Would there have been a space race to inspire generations of scientists and dreamers? Or would the world have turned its attention to other pursuits? Neil Armstrong's famous words, "One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind," became the motto of the space age. They encapsulated the wonder and excitement of exploring the unknown and the potential for humanity to achieve greatness. But what if those words had never been spoken? Without the moon landings, the world would have lost one of its most inspiring quotes, and with it, a sense of unity and purpose. The moon landings were a source of national pride for the United States, and a unifying force for people around the world. They captured the imagination of a generation and inspired countless young people to pursue careers in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Without the moon landings, the world might have been a different place. Today, we live in a world that is shaped by the achievements of the past. The technology we use, the way we explore the universe, and the way we think about humanity as place in the cosmos are all shaped by the events of the 20th century. The moon landings are a prime example of this. They were a defining moment for humanity, a testament to what we can achieve when we set our minds to it. But what if we had failed? What if the Apollo 11 mission had ended in disaster instead of triumph? Today, we might live in a world where space travel is a distant memory, where the only rockets that fly are those that carry weapons of war. Without the inspiration of the moon landings, who knows what kind of world we would be living in today? Perhaps we would have never ventured beyond our own planet. Or perhaps we would have continued to explore the solar system in search of new worlds to conquer. Maybe we would have found life on other planets, or maybe we would have found nothing but emptiness. The point is that we can't know because we can only speculate. What we do know is that the moon landings were a pivotal moment in human history. They were a defining moment that shaped our world and our future. They taught us that we are capable of achieving anything we set our minds to, that there are no limits to what we can accomplish. So let us take a moment to appreciate the legacy of the moon landings and the astronauts who made them possible. Let us remember the courage and determination that it took to venture into the unknown and explore the surface of another world. Let us honor the pioneers who dared to dream of a future among the stars, and who had the courage to make that dream a reality. Because of their bravery and sacrifice that we are able to look up at the moon today and know that there is no limit to what humans can achieve. Thank you for watching. And once again, thanks, subscribe, and wait for our next videos.